Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robison, and we're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube, where you can join in both portrait and landscape format, but just be aware that depending on the platform and format you choose, you might be subjected to Donald Trump's tariffs, which were 38%, but then reset to 10%. No, wait, now they're 15%, especially if you're on an island inhabited only by penguins, unless of course you ride with gold. I'm joking about that, but the underlying topic is deadly serious. And in a few minutes, I'm going to be bringing on former Associated Press editor for the Middle East and Europe, Dan Perry. All year, Dan has been making one provocative and important argument about the Supreme Court case on the constitutionality of Donald Trump's tariffs. Dan's been saying that this case is a test of whether the Supreme Court still functions, whether our Constitution still functions, whether our entire system still functions. With the court striking down Trump's tariffs this past Friday, it seems like the Supreme Court has passed that test, although more narrowly than many of us would like. But I think a different kind of test is now playing out in real time. It's a test of the President of the United States, and so far, he's failing in spectacular and alarming fashion. Many of you may be familiar with the Marshmallow test. You've probably seen videos of it on YouTube. Psychologists put a child at a desk with a marshmallow in front of them and make a simple offer. You can eat the marshmallow now, or if you wait 15 minutes, you get 2 marshmallows. Now, researchers have long associated the results with self-control, the ability to make short-term sacrifices for long-term gain. Right now, Donald Trump is facing his own version of the marshmallow test when it comes to tariffs. We've known almost from the beginning of his first term that Trump has a peculiar fixation on tariffs. In 2018, he launched a trade war with China, claiming trade wars were, quote, good and easy to win. But as I wrote in Newsweek a year and a half ago, that was plainly not true. Americans paid for that trade war. Reliable studies showed that it cost the U.S. economy nearly 300,000 jobs, half a point of economic growth, and a per household price hike of $800. But despite overwhelming evidence from his own administration's agencies, Trump went on to double down and make massive tariffs, the core economic promise of his 2024 campaign. Economists sounded the alarm. 16 Nobel Prize winners signed on to letters warning of disaster and reminding us that tariffs are taxes on Americans. They're paid by American consumers, not foreign countries. I even had conservative economist Brian Riedel of the Manhattan Institute on this show, explaining that if a 20-year-old proposed Trump's tariff policies in a traditional Republican congressional office, they'd be laughed out of the room. And yet, despite all of these warnings, Trump went ahead with his Liberation Day tariffs last April, and markets reacted immediately. Bond markets sold off so sharply that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly had to sneak into the Oval Office while trade goon Peter Navarro was distracted, literally, to plead with the president to stop before he sank the global economy. What followed was nearly a year of confusion and chaos, shifting threats, changing tariffs, economic uncertainty, more threats, fake deals. Trump raised tariffs on Switzerland, and then after they gave him a giant bar of gold, he lowered them. He was literally selling our economic pain, our jobs, our higher prices in exchange for gold kickbacks for himself. The results were clear. Economists broadly agree that Trump's tariffs effectively erased U.S. economic growth in 2025. They were the dominant contributor to inflation, the very price increases Americans have been struggling with. And they helped keep interest rates high, the same interest rates Trump's been demanding that Fed Chair Jerome Powell make lower. And the core justification for invoking emergency economic powers was supposedly that tariffs would reduce trade deficits and bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., but the evidence shows exactly the opposite. The U.S. goods trade deficit was essentially unchanged from 2024 last year, and the loss of manufacturing jobs actually accelerated. In other words, the central claims used to justify emergency action were totally bogus. By the way, be on the lookout for Trump to lie about them in the State of the Union tonight. We also now have labor data from Trump's own Bureau of Labor Statistics showing that 2025 was essentially a year without jobs. The U.S. created about 181,000 jobs. Roughly 15,000 per month. That's a statistical standstill, a zero, a well-done nothing burger with ketchup smeared on the wall. And the thing is, the White House knows this. They obsess over polling. They know that only about 1/3 of Americans believe that Trump has the right priorities. They know that voters correctly blame Trump for their economic pain. So on Friday, the Supreme Court placed a very tempting marshmallow in front of Donald Trump. They gave him a face-saving off-ramp, a way out. He could blame them and move on. Just take the win. Sure, there are other legal paths to reinstate tariffs, but if Trump simply refrained from eating the marshmallow, if he allowed the tariffs to die, he would get a much bigger benefit down the road: lower inflation, better economic growth, more jobs, and more political juice for the midterms. He just needed to contain himself. But of course, he didn't. Within minutes, he'd announced new tariffs, first a uniform 10%, then raising it again 24 hours later, 15%. More chaos, more costs, more uncertainty. Exactly what businesses didn't want, exactly what his key political advisors were most afraid of. He didn't just eat the marshmallow. He swallowed it whole and chased it with a bottle of tequila, worm and all. Back in January, I wrote a Substack article called Five Alarm Fire at the White House, describing that moment during a live broadcast, high stakes White House meeting with some of the richest, most powerful people on earth, where the fate of nations was up for grabs, where Trump started mumbling about his home renovation and wandered away to the window while VP J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio exchanged what can only be described as stunned horror looks. Let's take a look at that right now, actually. Let's bring that up.
And if you, in fact, if you look, come to think of it, I got to look at this myself. Wow. What a view. This is the door to the ballroom. Well, what did you have?
In any normal White House in history, an episode like that would trigger immediate consequences. Staff would be fired. Messaging teams would scramble. Senior officials would be thrown under the bus to contain the damage. There would be internal panic about leadership stability, even discussions about the 25th Amendment. That's what my article was about. What we're seeing now is worse. This isn't just a failure of patience or discipline. It's a self-destructive political suicide mission. This isn't about just giving up a small reward to gain a bigger one later. It's about knowingly eating a poisoned marshmallow because he simply cannot help himself. And all of this matters because Donald Trump's state of mind, his ability to apply reason, restraint, and strategic judgment isn't an abstract debate right now. It's not just about tariffs or economic policy. It's about decisions that could determine whether the United States moves toward war. Right now, we are witnessing the largest American naval buildup since the run-up to the Gulf War. 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, have been deployed. Billions of dollars have already been spent. Now, historically, when the U.S. assembles this kind of military force, it never does it without eventually using it. And yet, it remains deeply unclear what's guiding these decisions. What is clear is that the president is once again claiming unilateral legal authority that clearly does not exist, and the Republican Congress is refusing to step in and restrain him, meaning they're too afraid of the bad orange man to fulfill their constitutional oaths. And what is also clear is that the president of the United States has shown that he is so incapacitated that he cannot make rational decisions, even when they are in his own self-interest. To talk about tariffs, war with Iran, war with Ukraine, the British political crisis, and everything else in the known universe, let's bring in Dan Perry, because if there's any region of planet Earth, the solar system, the larger galaxy, the intergalactic federation that you have not been in charge of covering for the Associated Press, I have yet to find it. So, Dan, kudos to you. You have been beating the drum that this Supreme Court decision was going to be the litmus test for whether we still lived in a functioning constitutional republic anymore. Do you feel validated by their decision? Do we still live in a functioning constitutional republic?
It's not binary, functioning, not functioning. Do we live in one that functions enough? No, clearly not. Are we going to give it the functioning label because the Supreme Court showed that there is a limit? I mean, the Supreme Court basically took Trump's claim that he can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it without consequences and said, no, there's a limit. Now, he hasn't shot anyone yet, but he's done a tremendous amount of illegal activity on the assumption that the courts will take a year to catch up. The Republicans are lemmings, so they're not even going to try. And the Supreme Court may be bought and paid for. It turned out that the court has limits. Simple as that. They won't in any way enforce gun control. They won't save abortion rights. They won't do almost anything that is decent and necessary. They certainly won't interfere in healthcare, anything else that might matter for this country. They won't probably get involved in what ICE is doing or have to impose immigration control that is reasonable in any way. But all but three agreed that the tariffs, which are plainly illegal, are illegal. I mean, you look at Clarence Thomas, who, I mean, isn't always incoherent, and you read his argument for it, and you got to wonder, I mean, Thomas basically said, no, there is no limit. I mean, no, there isn't. You can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I'll come up with some lame-brained, harebrained, lame justification. So, yeah, I wouldn't call it functioning. I would say that America has a monumental dysfunction. And that dysfunction comes from the fact that the combination of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, ending up 30, 40 years later in the election of Barack Obama, made about a quarter to a third of the country insane. And they're all on the right. And that means that these people control the Republican Party. And so it has steadily moved in the last 15 years in that direction, ever since the Tea Party's internal victory became clear over Priebus and the other semi-normals that tried to move the party centerward. And now there's nothing to be done. I mean, the Republicans have become an anti-democratic party. They can't be in power. And yet they, as part of their anti-democratic way of being, will not accept election losses. I mean, consider that Trump clearly tried to steal the 2020 election. It was obvious. He was calling up the Georgia Grand Poobah and saying, find me the exact number of votes that is one more than the margin of loss to Biden. I mean, you can't do that. And then January 6th, you can't do that. And the original reaction of the Republican leadership to January 6th and to all of this was horror and to hope it goes away. And in the initial days after January 6th, you thought they're going to do the right thing and make Trump no longer legally able to be elected. But of course, once they saw the polls and once they realized that third of the country that is 2/3 of their voters is going nowhere, they turned tail. And all but a handful supported January 6th. It is insane. And so it kind of breaks my heart to see you, my good friend, talking to your good subscribers, and now I'm on your show, and I hope many of my subscribers are on, and they hear us talking largely within our own echo chamber, which is the majority of the country, but which doesn't matter a bit. So you talk about Trump acting against his interests. His interests are to maintain his mafia. His interests are to keep getting that block of gold. He doesn't care about lowering it. You're literally telling me, and our audience, and I'm going to disagree with you here to make it interesting, that Trump doesn't see that if he didn't do more tariffs, inflation would be less bad and other economic indicators would move in his favor. He doesn't care because his favor in his own mind, and this works with his base, is to insist on something ridiculous. If you're offended, that's just great because they're delighted. And it doesn't matter that the thing that offends you is, an untruth and they seem to be believing in a falsehood. It doesn't matter as long as you're offended. So all of this is for naught.
I want to take an opportunity to address some of the comments that we're seeing in the chat here. It's one of the most fun features of this live stream. And if you're someone of the MAGA persuasion who has found yourself here, like Lady Kirashka, who says, I'm party crashing because you showed up in my algorithm. Welcome. You are welcome here. We are not afraid of people with differing or dissenting views as long as they're offered in like a non-violent, crassly insulting way. I am open to dissents, and I'd like to address one. This is one that doesn't offer a lot in terms of substance, but at least they call me sir. L. Haynes 6361 says, you are lying, sir. I am happy to address any specifics you would like to offer. I believe that I am not. This one is not substantive, but it's not abusive either. It's just asking, do you have gray pubes? Says Son of Sam 3456. First of all, Mr. Bot, your
high class audience. I mean, this is hard to
your handle revealed. You're on the wrong channel. This is not the middle-aged guy porn channel. So I would redirect you elsewhere if that's what you're looking for. This one's also not substantive. They're calling you Panderi. Not sure what to make of that, but thanks for your contributions, Pan. Let's get to some more substantive ones because I think this is. There was one here. Oh, darn, I didn't start it. But there is a suggestion from someone in the chat that the question is, how can American consumers be paying for the tariffs Or how can they be causing higher inflation if inflation is only 2.3%? And let me address that one substantively for just a second. Inflation isn't currently 2.3%, it's 3%. The benchmark that the Federal Reserve shoots for is 2%. The best economic studies from the Federal Reserve suggest that Donald Trump's tariffs have added about a half a point to inflation. So they're the dominant force. What I said is Trump's tariffs are the dominant force pushing inflation up to where we don't want it to be. That is true. That's what the Federal Reserve is telling us. That's what their own studies are telling us. As far as how can consumers be paying, look, I would direct you to conservative economists, including Brian Riedel of the Manhattan Institute, now Jessica Riedel, who have explained this extensively. This is not a tax on foreign countries. This is a tax on American consumers. Dan, you've written about this a lot. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, you know what? When you like the people that believe this bullshit, they don't care about some expert economist. All right? So you have to explain it to them like to a child. All right? Tariffs are imposed on the importing company, which is invariably a US company. There are two things that can then happen. Because their costs have increased, they can raise prices if the market can handle them. If the optimal price point on the supply demand curve can't handle a higher price without them losing business, they're going to absorb the cost. That is an American company having less profitability, therefore paying their workers less, spending less to invest in themselves, giving less money to buy dividends. I mean, our business will suffer. The only scenarios where the tariffs are paid by someone is if the company absorbs the cost, an American company, or if they pass it on to the American consumer. There is no tariff in the history of tariffs that was ever paid by the country that is being tariffed. However, the country does not want to be tariffed. That's true, because it makes their exports to the US less competitive. So it's kind of true that if you tariff the hell out of India, the Indians are bummed. That's true. Who benefits? The only people that benefit are either the US government that brings in all this money, and the Republicans are supposed to dislike big government taxing people, or the specific business that's being protected. Like if you have a knickknack industry in America, and it's strategically important that it thrive, and the Venezuelans are making cheaper knickknacks, but you don't want the market to kill the domestic knickknack industry, so you impose tariffs on Venezuelan knickknacks, not on the entire country. I mean, to impose tariffs on the entire country is to mess up global commerce with taxes that are paid for by Americans. There's no
unless they pay you a big gold bar, in which case, then clearly there's no longer an economic
corruption explains everything very well.
It does.
I'm not sure the MAGA base can handle that truth.
Let me ask this. I mean, and first of all, I have to issue an apology to Lady Karashka, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her handle. Lady Karashka, not MAGA. Sorry, I made an assumption there. My bad. And so I stand corrected. I do genuinely welcome anyone, no matter how they showed up in our algorithm and your algorithm. But look, I want to get off of economics for a second. Look, my first job was in economics. I was an econ major. I'm a bit of a nerd for this. I could talk econ all day. Most people not that interested. From a political standpoint, you are still very well sourced, even though you're no longer with the AP. You've seen all the reporting. We know that this is a White House that is deeply attuned to polling. They know the economic facts, like the Susie Wileses, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles of the world. They know what time it is. They know how the American people view all of this. And they know that there is a clear off-ramp. You heard my thesis in the setup here, that this is a big test of Donald Trump's ability to say, okay, deep breath. This is a gift. Play the long game here. Play the long game. He couldn't pull it off.
No way.
I claimed that moment that I showed where he mumbled and rambled and wandered off to a window in this high stakes meeting with some of the richest, most powerful people on earth. That was less of an alarming moment than Trump's decision to continue down the tariff pathway. What do you make of that? Because I'm going to make the connection next to the looming war with Iran, which is a topic that you are deeply expert in. But what do you make of my assessment of Trump's state of mind?
It could be that he has an idée fixe. Like even a person who knows nothing sometimes like fixates on a particular thing. And it may be that he's irremovable from tariffs, no matter what his like immediate circle is telling him, if even they dare. The second thing is, it might not even be serious. I don't discount that possibility. What I do know is Trump will never say he's wrong, ever say he's wrong. And to say the Supreme Court just schooled me, that looks like a loser. So he would never admit that, right? There are two possibilities. One, he'd say, we got a year of tariffs and that's a huge win. Look at like the $6 trillion and make up some number. And the other possibility, say, not a problem, we got other ways to tariff, and then not even do it. I don't rule that out. The key is that his reaction should not be a conceding of any defeat or setback at all. And if he has to lie and say, I'm going to do new tariffs, it didn't say when he'd do them. It's conceivable that his circle has now been given some time to convince him to walk away from it. And you're right. There is a compelling argument in the polls, which is the midterms. They could tell him that if we lose the House and the Senate, like, you're going to face very big difficulties, not just impeachment, which will mean nothing because it won't be anything that leads to a conviction, but your agenda will be completely stopped by a hostile Congress. And therefore, the polls do matter. But I note that until now, other than in this kind of juncture that is rare, the majority of the public does not matter. The only thing that matters is if he holds on to MAGA, because that is the majority of the Republican Party. And that enables him to primary whoever steps out of line. It enables him to take over the party, in effect. And we have the opposite of a perfect storm, an imperfect storm, a horrific nightmare, where all these factors have combined to create this 1/3 grievance white nationalism in America, combined with an electoral system that favors the Republicans. I mean, if we had a parliamentary system, the other side would need to win by 5% to win. And that's insane. So the Republicans have a massive handicap advantage. And no matter what they do practically, they're always going to be competitive. So if you're corrupt and you want to keep getting those gold bars and you want to keep getting the ego satisfaction that can come with telling people, I could destroy countries and the Supreme Court won't let me do a $1 tariff. And you say this and no one even bothers anymore to like push back. If you want that kind of ego gratification to run around acting like you're king and no one is going to rebel, all you need is the Republican Party, specifically MAGA, behind you. All he cares about is what the MAGA polls tell him. And I don't think the MAGA public is necessarily in rebellion over the tariffs. They're incapable of understanding the economics. That's clear, the vast majority. Secondly, they don't really care that much because it doesn't, another 1% inflation. Who cares? And by the way, there is an argument, and this is very bad when you give a bad faith player any shred of an argument, but there is an argument that they can use, and then that creates obfuscation and confusion and both sidesism. And the argument is, look, we do have a massive trade deficit. That is not necessarily great. We have a huge problem with industries that have vanished and entire areas of the country are basically laid waste economically. And this is a pushback to globalization. And if they're willing to pay a price, then it isn't necessarily stupid because globalization caused a lot of damage. It just did. And the elites have pretended like there's no price. And that's why they've lost credibility with the average person.
That's a very insightful point, and I don't want to lose it because I do want to do a couple of things very rapidly here. I don't want to lose that last point you made, which is let's not pretend for a second that globalization has been a good deal for everyone. In fact, the net effects of trade and high rates of immigration have, I'm saying this objectively, I'm not trying to shit on immigration, but objectively, that has had a substantial effect on low and middle income Americans. And that is part of what fueled the rise of Donald Trump. It's one of the forces that have pushed the Democratic Party further to the left with Bernie Sanders' call for a pushback against the oligarchs. When he's speaking about oligarchs, he's not just talking about corporations and billionaires. He's talking about all the forces and people and entities that benefit from the economic regime of the last 30 years. And so you do see a clear effect that goes across political parties of people responding vigorously to the economic forces that have been unleashed around the globe over the last 40 years. I've written about this extensively in Newsweek. You've written about it as well. So I just wanted to give a high five to that point. Let me do two other quick things because I want to get us onto the looming war with Iran. One, I worked for people who are new to the chat here. And I think I've been forgiven for people I assumed were MAGAs. And I will say, by the way, to our friends who are over in the portrait chat, I am cool with trolls and bots as long as they're not being abusive. That's fine. If people want to come on here and help our viewership numbers and help more people through the algorithm to find this show, to find this live stream, benefit the Cliff's Edge YouTube channel, benefit Dan Perry's Substack, Ask Questions Later, which is amazing and people should subscribe to it. If people want to come and give us their algorithmic vote by coming there, as long as they're not being like racist, abusive, or like outlandishly making it difficult for the rest of us to coexist in the chat, have at it. Stick around. I will say also that for people who don't know me, because they're new to this, I spent about a decade working in Congress. I worked for swing state members of Congress, exclusively for Democrats, but kind of moderate centrist Democrats. Dan is a former lead editor for the Associated Press for Europe, the Middle East. You did like South America. You did that uninhabited island with penguins. You did the moon. It's really amazing. So between the two of us, we hopefully know a thing or two that we can share here. One of the things that I can share is I used to be on duty for every State of the Union to try to prepare my boss, my member of Congress, to respond to it. And it used to be, at the very least, even when we were disagreeing with George W. Bush, even when Joe Wilson was yelling, "You lie," at Barack Obama, there was still a relatively common basis of facts to work from. That's the difference that I think you're pointing to, Dan, in your discussion of what we're hearing from Trump and how untethered from reality he is when it comes to tariffs. Final thing I'll say in connection with the State of the Union, this is a public service announcement for our friend Cliff Schechter. He is, and I'm going to display this right here on the screen, they are doing a State of the Swamp alternative pre-buttal to the State of the Union. It's apparently going to be pretty freaking cool. Robert De Niro's there, Mark Ruffalo, Eric Swalwell, Stacey Abrams, and Cliff Schechter and the Blue Amp team are going to be there. So if people want to sign in, just go to the Cliff's Edge channel has it. Go to Cliff's Substack. There's a code, Cliff15, for 15% off. That is my public service announcement / ad of the day. With that, let's talk Iran. You are one of the biggest experts on the face of the earth on the Middle East, on Iran. Dan, why are we on the brink of war with Iran suddenly? What is the reason for this?
Trump boxed himself in by telling the protesters that help is on the way if they get massacred, and he thought that would scare the mullahs to death, but it didn't, and they went ahead and massacred a whole bunch of people, possibly tens of thousands. So now he looks like a chump if he doesn't do something. That's probably why. But into this come many other factors. One of them is that Trump doesn't believe in democracy. I mean, the December national security strategy explicitly walked away from 80 years worth of bipartisan consensus that the U.S. should promote democracy around the world. Remember George Bush? Everyone wants to be free, George Bush Jr. I mean, this is monumental. So to have Trump 2-3 months later attack Iran to change the regime seems a stretch because he doesn't care about this. Much more likely would be a Venezuela-like move where he does something to domesticate the regime. And then he can get what he wants from them, but there's not much he wants from Iran. I don't think he wants, I mean, maybe the oil, it's not reasonable because Iran's too big and that's not going to happen. But there's something else that needs to be said, which is the idea of regime change, something that Trump may not favor, is something weirdly that I think a lot of liberal Democrats are less against, because liberal Democrats do want evildoers to disappear. Now, interfering in another country's dictatorship requires a very high bar, really high bar. They have to be heinous. So I can't tell you that you never interfere, right? Like with World War II, we basically lament that the US didn't bomb the train tracks to Auschwitz sooner. And that wasn't because of US interests. That was because the oppression of the population under the boot of the Nazis was too great to be tolerated. Does Iran reach that level? Possibly. Quite possibly. Borderline. Subjective, obviously. The other argument that favors regime change efforts would be if a given country is messing with its neighbors and causing damage outside its borders. Now, Iran has done this in a manner bigger than anyone else I can think of, other than the Soviet Union, but over the last 20, 30, 40 years, they're tops. They have spread mayhem all over the Middle East with these militias, from Hezbollah, the Shiite militias, to the Houthis in Yemen, to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. They propped up Bashar Assad, which was a terrorist regime of the country, terrorist group of the country. They're horrible. So the idea of removing the regime is not necessarily stupid. The question
It's not crazy on the face of it.
becomes, what is the cost? What is
Right.
the cost? And is it possible? And this is a discussion we can have.
And what are the unintended consequences? So,
well, that's the
so
cost.
let me ask kind of a two-parter. Actually, I'm going to lead with a question from the chat, because I do like to prefer questions from people in the audience who are participating. Sonata 909 asks, if this whole buildup in Iran or the Gulf Coast, is it a bluff? Is that possible in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, generally, the idea of saber rattling might mean that you're merely intending to rattle. For that to work, Iran would have to give him something that he can then spin as a huge victory. And I think that's what they're trying to do as we speak. Iran tonight, tomorrow, is going to be handing in a proposal. And I bet you that if Trump sees any way to present that as a huge, unprecedented, colossal victory that Sleepy Joe could never have done, certainly not Barack Obama, even if it's identical to the JCPOA that Obama passed in 2015, that Trump idiotically walked away from in 2018, he might. And then our commenter might conclude that indeed it was a bluff, but not exactly a bluff. He threatened to attack, and then they gave him something. The question is, will they give him enough? My concern is this. He does attack, and then he suffices with some deal that is not materially different and not worth the damage of an attack, and includes, unfortunately, sanctions relief that gives the regime more life and runway. All of this for Trump's ego, so he can claim he achieved something amazing. That's not worth it. Better than a war that leads not to regime change, better even than a deal of any kind with these guys that gives them sanctions relief, is a continuation of maximal pressure.
I mean, my prediction is he's going to attack so that he can end the attack, claiming that he ended another war. Therefore, now he gets the Nobel Peace Prize.
That's 17 wars now.
170 verified wars. There are over 2,000 wars, a 9,000% decrease in wars. Yeah. What worries me most is the unintended consequences, the lack of foresight.
Yeah,
We saw
sure.
Tom Rick's book Fiasco about Iraq, that it is so easy to foresee the military phase. It is so hard to foresee all of the ends and to really, at a detailed level, look.
But look, to be fair,
Yeah.
that would always be an argument for inaction.
That is true. That is true.
So I would hope.
Do you think, I mean, look, people have figured out by now that we are both anti-Trump. I don't think we're deranged or anything. I think that we just try
It would be deranged
rationally
to not be.
Yeah, maybe we're deranged for different reasons. We clearly share the same taste in barbers and tailors, but I mean, we are not Trump fans. Yet, are you saying that you could make a case where a limited military engagement is actually the right move?
I'm saying a military engagement may be a defensible move if the intention is regime change. And for that, they'd have to have a plan that has any chance of succeeding. And if regime change happens, then I'll have to admit that Trump has achieved something stupendous, because the Iranian regime is a nightmare. And it is oppressing 100 million people almost in Iran like nobody's business. It has cast a horrible shadow on the Middle East, which is a valuable region, if nothing else, for the oil. But more than that, it is quite serious in its efforts to undermine and hopefully destroy Israel. And it is a true enemy of the United States in ways that are extreme and dangerous, to wit, if they don't get their way, they could easily cause terrorism in the US and in Western Europe, South America, and so forth. They're a terrorism exporter. But mainly, I know Iranians. I oversaw our bureau in Iran when I was Middle East editor. The Iranian people are the Persian people, a huge and impressive civilization that should be a force for good in the world, and they have been paralyzed and victimized for basically 47 years. And the interesting thing is, that's about the time span that history allowed the East Europeans to be oppressed by communism before it all blew up. And we see that the Iranian people right now are very bravely rising against this regime in huge numbers, despite the obvious intention of the regime to mow them down in the streets. And so if he does this, I'll have to say this is a good outcome. Broken clock twice a day, this sort of thing. Doesn't matter that it was for the wrong reasons, that he doesn't care about democracy, he doesn't care about the Iranian people, and is basically about his ego, and he knows nothing. Does that matter? I don't know. Maybe not. If the outcome is good, what can I tell you? But I don't think that's going to be the outcome.
Let me address something else that's come up, and I'm summarizing a little bit the sentiment that I'm hearing in the chats here. The Cynthia Rice, one of our very favorite participants, troll catchers. What's the Netflix show my kids were into for a while? Troll Hunters. Cynthia's like one of our top troll hunters. Cynthia offers the idea that Bibi is calling the shots, which in the case of this president isn't necessarily wrong. There was an earlier comment that any advocacy for the case for military action against Iran is essentially an ad for the Mossad, was what the commenter said, because it seems to be advancing Israel's interests, not necessarily the U.S.'s interests.
The Iranian
I just want to be
people,
clear to people.
The Iranian people have an interest in this regime disappearing. It's not Mossad. I mean, the Israelis have an interest, but the Iranians have a bigger interest.
And just so people know where you're coming from, you are one of the most outspoken critics of Bibi Netanyahu in contemporary media, and you know what the fuck you're talking about. You were early and often to this story, and you have absolutely eviscerated the guy. Would you like to expand?
Oh, Netanyahu is horrendous. And if his cabal stays in charge of Israel for much longer, the country will actually disappear. Iran won't disappear, but Netanyahu is systematically destroying Israel. By perpetuating the occupation, it will make it a binational country where the Palestinians don't have rights, if it's inseparable because of all these settlers. And by kowtowing to the extremist, ultra-Orthodox, massively expanding sect that will turn Israel into a theocracy, and the startup nation productive class will flee. This process will happen in 10 to 20 years if the right religious bloc is not defenestrated. And a hope for Israel. And there is hope, because on the plus side of the ledger, Israel has tremendous potential, and not just potential. I mean, a few years ago, they had a higher per capita income than Germany, France, and Britain. It's a global center of technology, and it's quite a vibrant, very amazing country. But Netanyahu is destroying it. So whereas the Iranians will eventually get rid of the criminals that call themselves the Islamic Republic, and America will hopefully get rid of this mutation of the Republican Party, Israel simply won't survive Netanyahu and his mafia. It just won't. I mean, countries have disappeared. I covered personally Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, the Soviet Union. These are countries that no longer exist. So huge geopolitical convulsions can lead to state entities evaporating. Now, viewers and listeners and readers may think it's inconceivable that Israel would disappear. I'm telling you, it's not inconceivable, and Netanyahu would be signed on that bill. So that's for Netanyahu. But he's not wrong about Iran. Not Iran, the Iranian regime. They really are horrendous, and that's the challenge. Because, look, I don't wake up in the morning thinking I gotta bust the balls of Trump no matter what I do. I mean, that would be infantile of me. So every now and then, if he does something defensible, I'm gonna call it that way. Not such a big challenge, because it doesn't happen very often. I mean, if I look at the ledger on Trump threatening to invade Greenland, a NATO country, Denmark, expressing utter indifference to our allies, kissing the ass of dictators, loving Putin, claiming Ukraine started the war, starting trade wars that, as you said so eloquently at the top of the hour, are very harmful to the American economy, lying to everyone all the time. And think of the bad karma. I'm trying to look for something simple, that no matter how much of a simpleton you are, you'd get it. He wants to shut down the Department of Education. Now, you tell this to a foreigner, and they're like, ¿Cómo puede ser eso? Like, I mean, no one can. So they have arguments about the wokeness and about the money and how it's not necessary and how it was actually weirdly only recently established in the 70s or whatever. I get it. But if you care about not looking like a moron, if you are going to talk about shutting down the Department of Education, you make a convincing case. Like you say, I know it sounds bad, but here's why it's good. They don't even do that.
Yeah,
They're happy
right.
to take the hit in saying, I want to shut down the Department of Education. We don't care. Education is bad is the implication. That is an avatar for Trump. And it's generally speaking unbearable. But on Iran, if he removes the regime, you got to give him that.
I want to pull on a couple of threads that came up a couple of minutes ago. One is a comment that just made me laugh out loud. I didn't follow this. Somehow in the chat, there was a discussion of 7,000 shekels. And then Shah Mashuk 9524 said, 7,000 shekels for these goys with 2 laughing emojis. I assume we're the goys involved. Look, I'll out myself. I'm Jewish. So mazel tov on your sick burn there. Or maybe that wasn't a burn. I'm not sure I understand it, but I guess I've just been called a goy. So fun. More to the point.
I mean, look, I've been called a goy too.
Fascinating.
Matt Robison.
Yes. Robison, fun fact, is derived from my ancestor who arrived in Baltimore Harbor about 150 years ago and didn't speak much English, but he was able to get across that he was a rabbi's son. So there you go. So I want to go back to something very insightful you said a few minutes ago about the dissolution of functioning democracies. You talked about leading coverage for the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia. I can't remember all of the examples that you threw out. And you were seeing this in the context of Israel and the possibility that Israel as a nation could collapse. And I think the other common thread that you're suggesting here isn't just multinational forces. It's a slow descent into corruption and kleptocracy, dissolution of the rule of law, and the ascendancy of a ruling oligarchical elite. Boy, there's a lot of $1,000 words for you. You would have completely red penned me as an editor. It's like, dumb it down there, Robison. But and it's a fascinating, I mean, this is essentially what killed post-Soviet Russia, was the ascendancy of Putin and his ilk, who decided to just grab a hold of as many billions of rubles of resources as they could. And it's the common thread when democracies die. So in that vein, I wanted to ask you about the stunning contrast that we've seen over the last week, the potential collapse of a government in the UK over the Epstein files and the issue of corruption, former Prince Andrew being arrested because he leaked secrets, the former ambassador to the United States being yanked and arrested because he potentially leaked material to Epstein, and the whole government potentially being brought down because of the Epstein scandal, and the shocking contrast to what we're seeing in the United States. Why, having led coverage for Europe and being an American and being intensely aware of the American political situation, why the contrast, Dan? Why is this a government-ending scandal in the UK and not one in the US?
Well, the simple answer is the US government cannot be ended. The framers of the Constitution that we've turned into demigods specifically intended for there not to be a monarchic presidency. So they built in all these checks and balances that have fallen apart. And they've fallen apart because of what I said before about MAGA demographically being mostly composed of primary voters that don't want liberal democracy at all. They want to keep the other races in check, is in fact what they want. And Trump's discovering that he can use that to turn Congress into lemmings, and the courts will take a very long time to ever end illegality. And there's no way to bring him down because the people in Congress in charge of bringing him down are too afraid of their own voters. You said at the top of the show, they're afraid of the orange man. No, they're not. They're afraid of the deplorables. That's who they're afraid of. They're afraid of being primaried via the orange man, but that's their actual issue. Note that all the people that voted for impeachment after January 6th are all gone or retired or primaried, all of them. So this is not a mirage. In America, you can't bring down a Republican government because the electoral system, through a series of mistakes, the politicization of the judiciary, which was a monumental mistake, the electoral college, which is the world's most fucked up electoral system that I've ever seen in my life, all of it makes Trump invulnerable. But on top of that, Political culture in America is weirdly forgiving. Like when Trump said, I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, it's kind of true that his side of the aisle will forgive almost anything. They forgave a putsch attempt on January 6th. People forget what actually happened. They forgave it. Meanwhile, in Britain, where I lived for 7 years, that's also a very diverse society. It's difficult to speak of Britons. They're not all Hugh Grant. But there still is a political culture that believes in consequences and accountability. It just is. And they really don't have a monarchic prime minister. The prime minister exists purely at the pleasure of the parliamentary party, meaning his congresspersons, desire to have him continue. And if he embarrasses them and shows any sign of causing the party harm, he or she can be ousted. So Liz Truss was ousted in less than 2 months, I believe, because she was causing clear and present damage.
She lasted less than iceberg lettuce in your fridge. It was like
that's actually a thing that one of the tabloids did. They had a lettuce on some streaming thing.
No, I mean, we get iceberg lettuce. My wife is a fan of iceberg lettuce. I guess I am also a bland thing that she enjoys. She's a fan of iceberg lettuce. I get a new iceberg lettuce once a week, and it rarely goes bad. But on the rare occasions where I've gotten a second one, it doesn't make it much past 10 days. And that's about how far Liz Truss made it.
Yeah. Anyway, so look, Starmer also was never popular. He never had a cult in the party or outside of it. He was like a safe pair of hands that wasn't going to mess up. And instead, he's been messing up. From day one, pretty much, his governments had a variety of truly bizarre, because they were petty, generally petty, expense scandals. And now they're having splits. The Jeremy Corbyn split. The Greens are rising. The Lib Dems are still around. Now, the British electoral system has its own issues. There are 660 some seats. Each one is its own election. And if you're to think that you have pro-Starmer or anti-Starmer, that's not the reality. But you do sort of have right and left. It really punishes splits. Because if the Conservatives get 40% and the 60% of the left is split into 6 parties, they're going to lose all the seats, right? And so there's too many splits right now. And by the way, Starmer didn't even win the landslide that people think he won. He won about 2% more than Jeremy Corbyn won a couple of years before, the previous head of Labour Party, which is hard, when that was a landslide win for the Conservatives. The only thing that happened is the right split. So Starmer's big victory was the right splitting. That's it and nothing else. In this chaotic situation that you have in the UK, with a right and a left split, and the electoral system guaranteeing the result will therefore be random, they are left with their culture of accountability and of good sportsmanship. And if you screw up royally, then, and you nominate a guy to be U.S. ambassador who was previously deputy prime minister, and the U.S. ambassador was a very big deal, especially in the era of Trump for the UK. It's like a cabinet minister. And that guy turns out to be handing secrets to Epstein.
Okay. Several things. First of all, screwing up royally is the definition of what Prince Andrew did. Second, I'd like to catch up a little bit on.
That's worth knowing.
Boom! A couple of comments in the chat here. I just love getting to these. Are just ones that caught my eye. I'm sorry for leaving people out who are making genuinely interesting comments. Paul Groppy-D6I says, have you noticed Bernie doesn't talk about millionaires? That's because he is a millionaire. I believe that is actually true, Paul. So the old imitation millionaires and billionaires has now become billionaires and millionaires worth more than 50 million, but not under.
But it was always stupid.
No, it was always stupid. But
because anyone in New York who owns a house is a millionaire. It's not,
and absolutely true.
I know that the average net worth in America is much lower. I get that. Fine. But there's a lot of millionaires judged by net worth, and they're not that rich. If they're living in San Francisco or New York, they can barely get by.
Although I will say that my old friend from Capitol Hill, Michaeline Kroll, who is a multi-time guest on this live stream, is Bernie's former chief of staff. And on those shows, she had shared hilarious details about the way that Bernie actually lives. And it's just like the parody on SNL. The guy doesn't live like a millionaire. I will say that. Speaking of millionaires, Ralph Palmquist 5095 says USA are the richest poor country in the world, 36 to 38 million in poverty. Spot on. It's an amazing comment. And that is why we see so much pushback against elite, so much economic
No,
pushback.
the U.S. is by far the least egalitarian country in the developed world. Our top 1% and top 0.1% have so much of the wealth and of the income that in the era of social media, it's making everyone else insane with jealousy, basically. And yeah, I talk about the past 30 years, really it's 40 years. And it's not just globalization, it's also liberalization. Thatcher and Reagan, and this is the old Republican Party, wanted to get out of the way of the economy, lower taxes massively on the super wealthy, assume that they're with their additional income, they're going to create jobs, which didn't work out, right? And as a result,
the Laffer curve doesn't work? Really?
you know what? Amazing.
Yeah.
But here's
all
here's the
bullshit.
result
Yeah.
that happened.
Yeah.
CEO pay, which is a complete and total scam because they pay off the boards that approve their pay, has gone up relative to the average worker by more than 10 times versus what it was in 1980. And meanwhile, the people that are left behind, they're not millionaires and billionaires or even near millionaires. A huge amount, a proportion of the US population doesn't have $1,000 in the bank for an emergency. About half the Americans never been abroad, don't have a passport. The commenter is right. It is the richest poor country in the world.
By the way,
you notice it. I travel around, you notice it. I mean, you go to Europe and Americans think Europe is done and Europe has become Saudi Arabia. No, man. Europe is quite nice and it doesn't look like a piece of shit. And you use public transport in America and you'd be pining for Europe if you've ever been there.
To your point about the fact that half Americans don't have a passport, funny enough, that's what the SAVE Act would require in order for you to be able to register to vote or stay on voter rolls, which of course disproportionately impacts what kinds of voters.
This is the other thing that is so frustrating in talking about the US and about Trump. He's right, you need voter ID. Okay, I mean, it's insane that you don't have it. Hold on, let me finish. It's insane.
No, I'm with you.
Every other country has voter ID. And it should be a government issued ID that everyone has, or a specific voter ID, either one. But to vote without an ID is, as they say in Britain, mental. Now, you start with that, and then you look at reality. And the reality is there's almost no fraud as it is. And the people who have been calling for voter ID ever since the Reconstruction back in the South after the Civil War, everyone who's been calling for election reform, without an exception of a shred of a shadow of a doubt, are people trying to suppress the vote. That's the truth.
No kidding. This is literally the article that I'm writing right now. I interrupted it to do this live stream for Newsweek. Hopefully it'll be out later this week, and I'll also share it on the Worth Knowing Substack. So I hope people will hang out for this. I agree with everything you just said. I also, I want to just bring up a few quick related comments. Lefty Gramps points out that trolls be trolls, Matt. So my call for people who are trolling politely to be allowed to persist. Yeah, I guess you're right, Lefty. You're not wrong about that. Trolls be trolls, but sometimes you can use them for your own purposes. And if it helps us. In a related comment, this is probably from a bot or a troll or both, but Shiny Galarian Moltres says, I love you. Thank you. That's really nice. We need more love.
Who is he, she, or it talking about here?
I think you, because you're hot shit in the chats right now, because Manthan F1 says Dan has pretty eyes. So Mazel Tov. That's amazing. Kudos to you. You apparently have pretty eyes. By the way, this pairs very nicely with the charge that was made when I was wearing this shirt about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Someone said, hey, Matt, I like your homosexual t-shirt. I'm like, I guess my shirt is into other t-shirts of the same color or something. Anyway, or the same cut. I don't know what that means, but that's awesome. A couple more quick ones. Lefty points out, Lefty Grams, the Brits are showing their stones while we show our ass. Chef's kiss, no notes. Lady Karashka, who I'm so glad that I misidentified you as a potential MAGA when you said that you'd algorithmically shown up here. And now you've stuck around and you've participated and you've made so many interesting comments. I'm just going to throw this one up. What makes you think China isn't playing the long game as we destroy ourselves from the inside out? Nothing makes me think that. I think they are tenting their fingers and saying, excellent. I don't know how one says that in Mandarin, but clearly it must render somehow. Anyway, Lady Karashka, thank you so much for your contributions today, which have been really interesting. And I hope you will come back to the live stream Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Brian McHale says, who's his side isn't forgiving Epstein and all his Dem buddies that are in the files. Yeah, there are Democrats in the Epstein files. 100% true. 100% true. You know who else is in the Epstein files? Donald Trump. More than 1 million mentions, 950,000 of which were redacted for no reason by his Department of Justice. I will let that sit there. And
all of the redacting.
Unbelievable.
Such a scam.
Let me get to this one because Dan, I want to prime you to actually respond to this one. I think this one's really interesting from Darren Connolly-R6P. How many lies do you think the orange buffoon will spew tonight at the State of the Union address? The over-under is 162 and 32. I got $200 in the over. The reason I wanted to bring this up is that Trump announced that he is investing in Truth Prediction, which is a prediction market branded under Truth Social. Like it's his prediction market. This is to compete with Polymarket and whatever the fuck, Kalshi is the name of the other one, which, by the way, Don Jr. has board positions on fucking both. Don Jr. is a strategic advisor to Polymarket and its number one competitor, Kalshi, which allow people to make unregulated bets with tons of insider trading potential in these prediction markets. Thumbs down, by the way. I know this is going to get me fucked on the Substack algorithm. I really don't care. But like that Substack for no fucking reason has just integrated Polymarket betting so you can like show what prediction markets are, as you're writing an article, are saying about whatever issue you're talking about. I don't know why we need that in the world. The point is, this is such an incredible recipe for corruption. And I have a prediction for you, and I want you to answer Darren's question. I have a prediction for you. I'll bet you some Trump-affiliated family member knows the answer to how many lies or how many mentions of certain words or whatever it is people are betting on Polymarket. They know the answer because they're insiders. I bet they're going to make millions of dollars betting on that tonight.
The question
and we're going to learn about it in a few weeks. And there's nothing we can fucking do about it. It's
fascinating.
Fucking corruption. Anyway, sorry.
It's fascinating to ponder if Trump himself knows about it and will calibrate his number of lies so that he can make money through representatives who vote in his name. That would really be interesting because, of course, you think he doesn't have awareness of his own lies. There's also, by the way, a methodological question, which is, does a repeated lie count? If he says, Tariffs brought in a lot of money from China, is that 2 lies or 1? Or 3? I mean, the phrasing matters. Anyway, I take the over. Probably 1,000 on the over. If I wasn't against these markets as a matter of principle, I'd put a lot on the over because he's not going to suffice with 162 by my definition of lies. I mean, he's got 162 per hour, and those speeches tend to be like 2 hours or so. Yeah, I'm going for 300.
It's got to be the over. I'm looking forward to. I mean, what's starting to worry me, and I know this is like departing on potentially a big long topic as we're getting to the top of the hour, and I'm sure you have other things to do because you're highly in demand, literally around the globe as a writer, consultant. Oh, I lost Lefty? Oh no, maybe someone else lost Lefty.
Does he mean that something you said offended Lefty?
No, I think it was a different chat that I just picked up on. I will say that your biggest fan, Manthan F1 is back saying someone interrupt you to tell you beautiful eyes. So there you go, man. You've got fans.
I think that's not a fan.
I think it's a fan. I don't think they're fucking with you. I think this is real.
I think Fan is a man who is fucking with us.
I don't think he's fucking with you.
Not that I can challenge the veracity of his claim.
Well, that's true. Look, I think when we write the story, who knows what history is going to say when we write the story of this Trump presidency. I am increasingly of the view that there is far above a non-zero chance that the dominant story is going to be the convergence of technological forces that are making people and companies billions and billions of dollars that we're never going to figure out all the hooks and tentacles involved. And it's this really strange confluence of crypto and AI and gambling, prediction markets, the unleashing of barely regulated gambling apps that we carry around in our pockets, and this unrestrained online meta world that we're getting enticed into that's essentially a gigantic Ponzi scheme that's enabling incredible amounts of wealth from people who are already wealthy and a ton of money laundering from fascist forces that you are deeply familiar with from all of your reporting. That's what the poly market and the truth prediction, or whatever the fuck he's calling it, that's what's on my mind about it. Is I think it's a massive money laundering scam and Trump enrichment scam, and all of the people who are showing up in the Epstein files, they're all part of this world of wealth and tech and kind of elite. They live in this other world and they're all scratching each other's backs. That's sort of like my big Venn diagram connection of all of these stories that we've been talking about for the last few minutes. And I think we're going to be trying to untangle it if we survive the next few years for years and years to come.
I'm a bit less conspiratorial. I think Epstein may be a singularity the way Trump is. I mean, he's just this weird thing. Of course, there's the global super rich and a political elite definitely are capable of such a thing, but generally, just like our system allows a person to act like a king, generally doesn't happen. So somehow Epstein happened and Trump happened. Does the fact that they happened reflect something different or bigger? Maybe. I would say the singularity, when tech becomes more powerful than man, you can define that different ways, but we may be approaching a point where tech causes more harm than good. And I don't want to believe that. My own studies up to the PhD level are in computer science. I am in no way blind to the amazingly valuable contributions that tech and computer science in particular have brought to the world. But at this point, you can clearly see the negative. If AI puts everyone out of business, like everyone immediately, then that's bad for society. And it won't be that extreme, but it may be extreme enough to conclude that it's a net negative. Moreover, the incredible inequality that we've seen is creating these pathologies among people like Peter Thiel and others, where they think they're like born to rule, and it's pretty soon that they're going to use tech to biologically enhance their kids. And they're things that caused liberal democracy to be such a powerful force in the last almost century look to be diminishing, because not only does the lower socioeconomic classes think it was a scam against them because of what transpired, but also the higher classes as a consequence, higher socioeconomic classes, don't believe in it either. And we're going to end up with fascistic regimes on the one hand and fascistic minorities trying to control the fascistic regimes. Everything is going to be fascist from the bottom up and from the top down. And this liberal center that basically believes that humanity is fundamentally good, and if we have freedom, that will yield good results, is diminishing. So if I have to put my finger on one thing that will be a sign about whether all these signs of impending doom are going to happen or not, it kind of comes down to, do the Republicans get trashed in the coming two elections? If they do, then that shows that rationalism might prevail. If they don't, we really have to prepare for the worst.
And I think on that note, I'll just shout out a couple more comments here. Will Knight 33K pointing out Peter Thiel is also a part owner of Polymarket. Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure they're doing all kinds of internal insider betting and bet manipulations to shape a desired narrative. 100%. You are spot on. And, this comment from Sonata 909, the shadow government discovered in the Epstein files be broken up. It's been going on for decades. That's the thing that's been revealed here, is that there is like all the conspiracy thinking that's out there, like, oh, there isn't a fucking deep state. Let me tell you something. Okay. I worked in Congress. We're not a fucking deep state. Okay. We are poorly paid 20 and 30 somethings at the time. I'm beyond that now, just trying to work for our government and serve the public, make a difference. The people who are over in the administration, same deal. And I mean that about my Republican
counterparts. Can I just add to that?
Please.
I worked for over a quarter century at a high level of international media. People think the media is trying to lie and they have their own agenda. And I keep hearing this from people, like the media has an agenda. The mainstream media got an agenda. I was the chief editor of AP in half the world geographically. And our subscribers in those regions were most of the media. If there was a conspiracy with an agenda, I would have heard about it one time in those 28 years. There is no conspiracy, but there is an agenda. And that agenda is somehow to stay in business. And the
100%.
dumber the people are, the more you have to dumb down to stay in that business, and that's the actual problem. It is a problem.
And that's the thing, I have people in the audience, Republicans and Democrats, by the way, who have told me offline, like, yeah, I'm a little tired of the Epstein file story. Like, it seems a little obsessive. And there are people saying in the comments here, they tend to think like, oh, Democrats only care about Trump's connections and Republicans only care about the Democrats that show up. I think the story that should unite all of us is that comment that I read a moment ago, that what was revealed here was the fact that it's not so much a shadow government as there is an elite cabal. There is that is deeply intertwined with one another, doing favors for one another, enabling greater wealth for one another, enabling inside access for one another, preening for one another, and enabling some of the worst crimes imaginable for one another.
That's undoubtedly true. And I spent years going to Davos, the World Economic Forum, and really being on the inside of this. Never got invited to these parties, unfortunately. But you can tell that the Davos man really is a thing. And for a while, they were feeling very superior. And that pissed off everyone else. And that Trump is a reaction to that. But my problem with this focus on that, for real, is that it serves the dark side in the following way. It makes people say, yeah, everyone is a liar. They're all liars. They're all corrupt. They're all criminals. And that's not true. That who benefits from the idea that everyone's a liar? The biggest liars. Who benefits from the idea that everyone's corrupt? The ones who are truly deeply corrupt and incapable of behavior, like we see from Trump. All this stuff you're talking about. Do you remember Trump is just going to put out a polymarket version on True Social, which is his social media network? Do you remember when the president wasn't supposed to run another business because they might use it to profit off the office? As late as 2016, Trump is going through motions, at least pretending like he's going to give up all his businesses. That's not even happening anymore because norms have disappeared. I mean,
well, this is the essence. This is the essence of the Swiftboat technique: is to charge your opponents with that with which you are yourself guilty, and to get there first. So Trump claims that the elections are rigged against me. Oh, it's so rigged. I know you're the world's biggest victim, crybaby. And it turns out that Elon Musk is sending pre-filled out voter application forms to voters in Georgia. Like, if you're corrupt, accuse your opponents of corruption. If you're lying, accuse your opponents of being liars. And it's the same playbook over and over again. We've belabored this. I think we've gone about as far as we can stretch your capacity to go late in the evening and to over.
My head is about to explode, man. But it's been
fascinating. I know So let's get you out, all of us out, on a couple of quick important things. First of all, one more comment here from a troll at one less than you says, another weak, uneducated liberal. First of all, I'm overeducated, not uneducated. Okay. And I can bench more than you, bro. Second of all, Dan Perry, I mean it. Ask questions later. You can only subscribe to so many Substacks in the world. Make this one of them, because you are really killing multiple birds with one stone. You're getting the whole world of insight in Ask Questions Later for the price of one Substack. It is really, truly worth it. So
they got to do 3. Everyone should be subscribed to Worth Knowing, Cliff's Edge, and Ask Questions Later.
That is true. I'm shilling for you right now. No, my shilling for Cliff is show up to he is at this defiance.org/State of the Union. He's selling merch. He's doing stuff. This sounds amazing. Robert De Niro is going to be there. I just had COVID and I rewatched the whole Godfather, and it's amazing. Godfather Part 2. Anyway,
I love the ridiculous line. It made me look ridiculous.
Oh my God.
And a man in my position
Let me tell you something, my Kraut Mick friend. Oh my God. People don't talk like this anymore, but it's fucking amazing. It's absolutely incredible.
Man in your position cannot afford to look ridiculous.
Ridiculous. I am Matt Robison. You can find me worthknowing.substack.com. If you like to walk around old-fashioned style with your podcast in your pocket, you can find us at beyondpoliticspodcast.com. All right, Dan, thank you so much. For everyone out there, survive the State of the Union. Go to Cliff's thing or don't. Watch The Godfather Part 2. Take a break from the lies, defuse.
Oh, yeah.
Try to make it. Try to hang on another week.
I'm fascinated by the idea that Don Jr. is trying to get Trump to say more lies without but Trump doesn't know their lies. I want to know what that looks like. Talk more about the tariffs, whatever, because there's a lot of money in it for anyway. We'll be, by the way, can I just make a plug for my
Please
podcast, Critical Conditions podcast, co-production with the Cosmopolitan Globalist. We should have you on, actually.
I would love. Let's do it. It's a home and home. It's let's absolutely do it. And I hope people, by the way, while we've still got everyone before we go, we've had an awful lot of Republicans and Democrats in the chat tuning in here today. I do a Friday show. It's on Worth Knowing on YouTube and on my Substack with a Republican also named Matt. He is a Republican political operative who has run Senate campaigns for some of the best known Republicans in the country. And we try to make politics fun again. This doesn't have to be dreary, awful, a death slog. Like, it can actually be kind of upbeat, urbane, factual, interesting. We try to have a good time with it. So I hope people check it out.
Is the other Matt a MAGA?
No, he's not a MAGA. He is trying to reclaim the court. He's a Reagan Republican. He's a good old fashioned, which MAGAs would call like a cock these days. But, you know, it is what it is. All right. Hey, thanks so much, everyone. In the meantime, I'll see you next week. Stay safe. Be well. We'll see you soon.